Take it off! The largest man screamed, yanking the woman's collar so hard the fabric hissed and tore at the shoulder seam. She was slammed against the chain-link fence on level 2 of a midnight parking garage. 3 men, 1 exit, and no cameras to witness the horror. But they weren't alone. A female FBI agent and her K-9 were motionless in the shadows, watching the geometry of a trap turn into a masterpiece of tactical survival. Subscribe now and stay until the end. Comment with your city so I can see how far this story of justice reaches. The sound of the tearing jacket seam was like a gunshot in the hollow, concrete silence of the garage. The woman hit the fence with a dull metallic rattle that vibrated through the steel mesh. Morgan Reed stood frozen in the stairwell, her hand buried in the thick fur of Axe's vest. She felt the dog vibrating against her palm, a living spring of muscle waiting for a single syllable to release 76 pounds of fury. "Take it off right now! Don't make me ask again!" the heavy-set man barked. He had his hand bunched in her collar, his face inches from hers, radiating a physical confidence that only comes from outnumbering a target. Morgan shifted her weight, her boots silent on the concrete. She had been on this base transfer for only 6 days, looking for paperwork to keep her mind from the dark places it went when she was idle. Beside her, Axe wasn't breathing normally. He was in a state of full-body stillness, a recognition focus that Morgan had learned to treat as the most serious alert in his repertoire. "Or what, sweetheart?" The second man laughed, angling his phone to record her face. "Or I ask you once more," the woman against the fence said. Her voice was low, flat, and lacked even a tremor of the adrenaline Morgan expected to hear. "And then I stop asking." Morgan's thumb hovered over the release on Axe's lead. She was 3 seconds from stepping out, from identifying as FBI, from ending the escalation. But then she saw the woman's feet. They were shoulder-width apart, her weight distributed in a way that had nothing to do with a victim in distress. The woman wasn't looking for an exit. She was running a triangle of assessment. The large one, the phone, the man blocking the door. "You deaf? I said, take it off!" The large man yanked her harder. "Let go of my jacket," she replied. It wasn't a plea, it was a directive. Morgan felt Axe's focus lock onto the woman. He wasn't looking at the threats, he was looking at her. So it was a recognition focus Morgan had only seen twice before, once with a combat controller and once with a field medic who had worked a casualty situation alongside them. Axe was telling her that this woman was in their category. She wasn't a civilian caught in a nightmare. She was a professional waiting for the geometry to align. "You're going to do exactly what we say. You stop acting like you have options," the man hissed, reaching for her shoulder with his second hand. The woman moved, not a swing, not a desperate kick, but a surgical rotation of her left shoulder that redirected his grip into empty air. She stepped 8 inches into his space and drove her right palm into the center of his chest. It was a sternum strike, a precise electrical bypass of his muscle system that sent 6'2" of heavy-set aggression stumbling backward into a concrete pillar. "FBI, K-9 unit, nobody move!" Morgan stepped into the light, her voice cutting through the garage like a blade. Axe surged forward, positioning himself slightly ahead and to the right in a flanking posture that communicated engagement without ambiguity. The man by the exit bolted for the service door, but Axe's head snapped toward him with such mechanical precision that the man froze mid-step. "Mind your business, agent. This is a private matter," the large man spat, pushing himself off the pillar, his embarrassment turning into a jagged, dangerous anger. "It stopped being private when you touched her," Morgan replied, her eyes never leaving his hands. "And that phone in your partner's hand? It's been recording since before I walked up. It has your faces, my badge, and every second of that assault." The man with the phone looked at his device as if it had suddenly turned into a snake. The math in the room was changing. The group dynamic was shattering under the weight of the uniform and the silent, amber-eyed threat standing beside it. "You going to sick your dog on us over some girl in a parking lot?" The large man scoffed, but the bravado was hollow. "I don't have civilian arrest authority here, but I have federal authority to hold this position until local PD arrives in 4 minutes," Morgan said, her voice level and terrifyingly calm. "Or you walk away right now, all 3 of you. That's the only offer on the table." The large man looked at the woman against the fence, then at Axe. The dog wasn't even looking at him. Axe was still locked on the woman, his tail moving once in a slow, deliberate motion that Morgan recognized as a verdict. The large man felt the weight of something he couldn't name. He straightened his jacket, muttered, "Not worth it," and led his partners through the stairwell door. Morgan didn't lower her guard until the sound of their footsteps faded. She turned to the woman, who was still standing by the fence, her dark hair loose, her hands at her sides in that specific, trained configuration. "You waited," the woman said. It was an observation, not a thank you. "You didn't need me to come in sooner," Morgan replied. "I had the geometry in 30 seconds. The large one was the primary. The door was the block. The phone was the liability," the woman stated with the flat accuracy of a debrief. "I was handling it." Chititad Axe walked toward her unprompted, something he had done only 4 times in 3 years. He pressed his forehead into her palm, his eyes half closing as she found the specific pressure point behind his left ear. She knew exactly where it was. "What's his name?" she asked. "Axe," Morgan said, watching the dog surrender to her touch. "You've worked with military dogs. That's not a question." The woman stood, her hand moving from the dog's head with a grace that felt lethal. "A few," she said. Morgan looked at the torn shoulder of the woman's jacket, then at the surgical scar peeking out from her collarbone. A specific type of procedure from a specific type of environment. "What unit?" Morgan asked, her voice low. "What makes you ask?" "The way you read 3 targets without moving your eyes. The palm strike placement. The way my dog is looking at you," Morgan said, holding her gaze. The woman was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the stairwell door, then back at Morgan. "The one with the phone," she said, her voice changing. "The angle changed twice. Before they grabbed me, it was pointed at my face. Then it shifted to my collarbone." She touched the scar on her neck. He was looking for something specific. He wasn't recording for the same reason the others were there. Morgan felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. The random assault was a verification mission. "How long have you been in Norfolk?" Morgan asked. 9 days, the woman replied, her controlled expression showing wear for the first time. "And before that is complicated." Somewhere below them, a door opened. The footsteps that came through it weren't the careless rhythm of a shortcut. They were one set, moving slowly, deliberately, with the specific cadence of someone who knew exactly where they were going and had no reason to hurry. Morgan felt the atmospheric tension thicken as Axe began to emit a low, guttural growl from deep within his chest, a frequency of sound that could make anyone's skin crawl. The man who just stepped through the door was not like the low-level thugs from before. He carried himself with an expensive poise and the predatory air of someone who held absolute power. He looked directly at the woman against the fence without a hint of surprise, as if everything was proceeding according to a preordained plan. "Hello, Elena," he said in a voice as cold as the concrete, completely ignoring the presence of a federal agent and a K-9 in full combat stance. Elena, or rather, the woman Morgan now knew was Elena, remained motionless. But Morgan saw a flash of raw fury in eyes that had previously been terrifyingly calm. "You've been watching the hotel for 9 days, Elena stated, her voice as sharp and precise as a surgical blade. The stranger nodded in casual admission, then turned toward Morgan with a condescending half-smirk. "Agent Reed, I know you're on a base transfer here in Norfolk, but believe me, this is not a situation you want to interfere with." He rattled off Morgan's professional background like he was reading a classified internal file, a silent threat that he knew exactly who she was and could make her career vanish in a heartbeat. The dramatic tension peaked when the stranger announced that the second layer of his organization had been moved up and would arrive in just 2 hours, instead of the original 6. Morgan tightened her grip on Axe's lead, feeling the dog's hot breath as he stepped forward to bridge the gap between Elena and the man. "No authority supersedes the protection of a citizen being threatened right in front of me," Morgan shot back defiantly, while simultaneously touching the camera on her vest that was streaming live to the command center. Elena looked at Morgan, then at Axe, and for the first time in 8 months of running, she decided to gamble on a trust she couldn't fully explain. She pulled out a specialized communication device she had carried in silence for months, took a deep breath, and pressed the activation button, she officially ending her invisible existence to face the darkness head-on. The unmarked device in Elena's hand pulsed with a single, steady blue light, a beacon that Morgan knew was now broadcasting their exact coordinates to a level of authority that didn't exist on any standard organizational chart. The stranger's condescending smirk vanished, replaced by the involuntary stillness of a man realizing his operational briefing was now obsolete. "You're making a mistake, Elena. That call doesn't just bring protection. It brings the very people you've been running from for 8 months. Elena didn't blink, her thumb hovering over the final confirmation. "I'm not running anymore, Vincent. I'm negotiating, and for the first time, I have a witness who isn't on your payroll." Morgan stepped into the center of the gap, the weight of her FBI badge feeling heavier than usual against her chest. She tapped the recording indicator on her vest camera, a silent signal that the next 60 minutes were being archived in a secure federal cloud. "You mentioned a second layer arriving in 2 hours, Vincent. I suggest you tell them to bring their lawyers, because this entire conversation is already being logged by the Inspector General's ombudsman." The stranger's eyes shifted to the camera, his posture adjusting from predator to bureaucrat in a fraction of a second. "You're playing a dangerous game, Agent Reed. You don't even know whose file you're holding open." Axe let out a sharp, sudden bark that echoed through the concrete levels like a cracking whip. He wasn't looking at Vincent anymore, but at the stairwell door behind them. "Someone's already here, isn't there?" Morgan whispered, her pulse thudding in her ears as she felt the dog's muscles coil for a strike. The major twist came when the door didn't burst open with tactical teams, but with the hollow, rhythmic sound of a single set of footsteps, slow, measured, and terrifyingly familiar to Elena. Elena's hand trembled for the first time, her grip tightening on Axe's vest. "It's not the retrieval team, Morgan. It's the oversight authority itself." Vincent took a deliberate step back, his own phone buzzing with a notification that made his face go pale. The jurisdiction dispute just ended. The program has been frozen pending a full integrity review. Morgan looked at the unmarked device in Elena's hand, realizing the gamble had paid off. But the look on Elena's face wasn't one of relief. It was the specific, the cold stillness of someone seeing the person who had betrayed them for the first time in 8 months. "They didn't come to save me, Morgan. They came to see if the file I'm carrying is still worth killing for." The stairwell door creaked open, and as a shadow stretched across the concrete, Axe moved into a full block position, his amber eyes locked on the figure with a verdict that no amount of rank could overrule. The shadow that stretched across the concrete belonged to a man in a clean, expensive jacket. He moved with the measured, deliberate pace of someone who knew exactly where he was going and felt no need to hurry. The first mini-climax shattered the room's remaining silence when he stopped 10 feet away and looked at Elena with a terrifyingly calm validation. "Hello, Elena. You've been consistent. That was always your weakness, and your strength." Vincent retreated into the background as this new arrival turned his clinical assessment toward Morgan. "Officer Reed, Petty Officer First Class K-9 Handler, currently on base transfer. I don't have a problem with you. Yet. Step aside." Morgan felt Axe's growl before she heard it, a frequency that bypassed the ears and went straight to the bone. "Nothing supersedes my jurisdiction when a citizen asks not to be approached," Morgan shot back, her hand tightening on Axe's vest as the dog moved into an immovable block position between the stranger and Elena. The major twist struck when the man checked his watch and revealed that the 90-minute window for a second-layer retrieval had just been cut to pieces. The program had officially burned her identity and flagged Norfolk, meaning the conversation was no longer a negotiation. "Elena, you know what happens when you go to ground again. You know what the second layer looks like," the man said, his voice carrying a specific, dark regret. Elena stepped forward, coming alongside Axe rather than hiding behind him. Her voice was a cold, jagged blade of truth. "The better option was 8 months ago, before you sent 3 men into a parking garage to confirm my face," she stated, her gaze shifting to Morgan with the first real spark of a decision. A profound shift occurred as Elena revealed that her unmarked device wasn't just a beacon, but a direct line to someone with oversight authority over the very program that held her file. "I've been invisible for 8 months because reaching out through official channels means I exist again. And everything that comes with existing returns with it," she whispered. The tension peaked as Morgan realized she had to make a choice that could end her career. She began uploading her vest camera footage to 3 external, irrevocable locations simultaneously. "I've made the right decision in environments worse than this, and I'm still here," Morgan told the man, her eyes locking onto the lens of her camera as the transmission hit 100%. The final hook dropped when the stranger produced his own phone and showed Elena a file she believed had been destroyed. The original mission file, Elena, not the managed version, the one that shows what you actually did. Elena took the device, her hand pressing firmly onto Axe's back as she read the truth that had been sealed away to protect the program rather than her. She looked at Morgan, her breathing changing for the first time. "The upload you sent, it's the only thing that makes this file matter." The man in the clean jacket stood motionless as Elena finished reading the decrypted file on his screen, the silence between them heavy with the weight of 8 years of history. Morgan watched Elena's jaw work once, a subtle release of tension that signaled the last wall of her isolation was finally dissolving. "The mission file shows exactly what I reported," Elena said, her voice carrying a raw, unmanaged honesty that Morgan hadn't heard until this moment. The stranger nodded slowly, his gaze shifting to the vest camera still blinking on Morgan's chest. "Yes," he admitted, his voice stripped of its operational flatness. "The sealed designation was applied by someone who needed the program protected, not you." Morgan checked her watch, the numbers 1:05:32 a.m. glowing in the dark, as she confirmed the upload was complete. "The Ombudsman has the footage, and the mandatory review has already been triggered 18 minutes early," Morgan announced, her voice echoing off the concrete pillars. Vincent took a small, involuntary step back, his phone vibrating with a notification that signaled his operational window had just slammed shut. The stranger in the clean jacket didn't look at his own device. He kept his eyes on Elena, a look of profound, quiet regret surfacing through his composure. "Elena," he said softly, but she cut him off with a sharp, clinical look. "Don't," she whispered. "The better option was 8 months ago." Axe shifted his weight, pressing his flank against Elena's left leg in a gesture of absolute, physical trust that Morgan had seen only in the rarest of partnerships. The dog's amber eyes were half closed, his breathing steady, as if he had already sensed the resolution long before the humans in the room acknowledged it. "He knew," Morgan said, looking down at her partner. "At the bottom of the stairwell, before I heard a single word, he already knew who you were." Elena reached down and let her hand rest on Axe's back, her fingers finding the specific pressure point behind his ear that made the dog lean into her palm. The stranger checked his watch one last time, then sat down on the concrete barrier, his hands on his knees in the posture of a man who had finally finished a long, exhausting walk. 90 minutes, he said, looking at the floor. "I'll be in the hotel lobby. If the review produces a suspension, I need the official documentation in my hand before the report transmits." Elena nodded once, her expression reflecting the specific exhaustion of a professional who had been in sustained motion for far too long. "Understood," she replied. The man stood up, straightened his jacket to regain his professional presentation, and walked toward the stairwell without another word. Morgan watched the door close, then turned to Elena, the dramatic tension of the last 2 hours settling into a quiet, mutual understanding. 56 minutes until the review concludes, Morgan said. Elena studied her, her gaze direct and devoid of the performance she had used on the men who cornered her. "You did the right thing, Reed," Elena said, her voice finally carrying a sliver of warmth. "The upload, that was yours to make, and you did it without knowing how it would land." Morgan looked at her dog, who was now sitting proudly at her side. "Axe knew how it would land," Morgan replied. "He's right more often than I deserve." Elena turned toward the exit, her stride purposeful and unhurried. The walk of someone who had stopped being small and started being exactly what she was. Morgan stood in the garage for a moment longer, listening to the footsteps fade, knowing the record she had created was irrevocable, and that the truth was finally in the hands of people who would do the right thing with it. She crouched down and put her hand on Axe's face, the dog leaning into her touch as they prepared to walk back to the world they had just changed. In the hollow quiet of Level 2, Morgan realized that the most important navigation they had wasn't a set of orders. Chokadim, but the 76 pounds of loyalty that had stopped walking when walking was wrong and started when it was right. They walked toward the hotel lobby together, leaving the darkness of the garage behind, because the cost of being somewhere else was a cost that had already been paid in full. In the end, some people follow what they know without waiting for permission, and on a midnight in Norfolk, the right person was exactly where they needed to be, standing beside the dog who already knew